Hey everybody, what's going on? Today I want to talk about the story of Cain and Abel. And anytime I look at Bible verses, I tend to use the King James Version just because, from what I understand, that's the most authentic version that's out there, with the original, or at least close to original as you can get. Wording is still there. And the reason that that is important is because when you play a game of telephone and I say the word caterpillar and it goes through 10 people and ends with you, and then you say coffee, there's a problem. And the same thing goes with the Bible and different things that are passed down from generation to generation. In my opinion, things can get altered and changed to better serve the interests of those who are making the altercations or alterations that cause altercations, um, but the alterations to serve them. Because if I change something to make it work for me, then I can skew the information and have you do something that works in my favor. So just to keep the authenticity of the original word, I think is very important, and that's what I recommend. And until further notice, that's the one I'll keep using, but I'm sure my opinion can change in the future. And when I talk about this story, I'm saying it from a lens of figurative language. So none of it is literal, like I had said, and there's a lot of symbolism. So with that being said, I don't necessarily know 100% the way how things were spoken back when the Bible was written. I don't know who wrote it. I might lean towards it actually being gifted to people who exist now in reality to navigate what the human mind is capable of, because from what I've all learned as of recently is that the Bible's mostly a book about your psychology. It is the evolution of your psychology, and each of the stories that are written in the Bible are given to us in the symbolism of people, whether it's in partnerships, so dual nature, there might be 3 people, 4 people, and all of that's kind of relevant because it can represent the dual aspect of your feminine and masculine principles. It can represent the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit within you, so that would be 3. There's so much content that's rich in symbolism that this is the most important part of like what I'm getting to, is that it can mean so much to anyone. The most important thing though is to try to understand what it meant at that time, because people at this time, I'm sure, didn't have either the rights or maybe the resources to be able to write, because to write, I would assume would be to like be a scribe. How many times can I say be? We'll let you figure that one out. Time will tell. But if you had the ability to learn, to have education, you had to have been of a higher class. And obviously the higher class wasn't dominant. So how did the people speak at the time? Through symbols, through, I'm in different parts of the world, hieroglyphs. Like, I'm not too sure about the time period in which I'm trying to like say this all, but it's all in context to the Bible. It ties in with Greek mythology. It ties in with Hinduism. There's nuances of all religions in the traditionally Catholic book, which is crazy because there's so many things happening now that are polarizing because one religion believes it's right over the other, and that's just not the case at all. Even though I'm a novice at understanding my first religion, which is Catholicism, I'm slowly learning more about the other religions, which is helping me tie them all together. That was a huge side tangent, but I like to just say all these things first and foremost to say, well, 1, I don't know everything. 2, I'm trying to learn as much as I can. And 3, I'm a big believer, if you teach, then you can also learn from somebody who's hearing it from you. Because at the end of the day, the whole idea of expansion is about creating. And if you don't speak, if you don't create anything with your mind, then you're just going to be stagnant, and that causes a conflict within us. So to create is to expand and to share without judgment, and to take what resonates and to discard what doesn't, and expand in the own way you're meant to. So with that being said, today I want to talk about Cain and Abel. Like, I haven't said that already. And I want to go line by line just to break down exactly what the story means per each sentence, because I don't know about you, but anytime I would go to church and sit down, don't get me wrong, I love the environment. I love feeling like I was closer to what I felt was love, but worshiping the statues, donating all the time, not that there's anything wrong with it, but that's also slightly questionable, because providing material, like, you're shoving a basket in my face. right? You're not just saying, hey, you can donate if you want. You're just like, no, here's the basket. And you know what's gonna make you feel like shit is if you don't donate, because you know why? People are around you and they're watching you, and that makes you feel guilty. And it's like, okay, so there's that. And then there's the whole like different kinds of things, like dumping a baby's head into water or immersing them in water, like that changes them at all. It doesn't change them physically, it changes them mentally. And if that is the point of religion, is to change you mentally, then what's the purpose? We don't necessarily need the physical action in which we're doing these traditions, like eating the Eucharist or dumping somebody in water or like putting oil on their forehead or ashes. It's like, this does nothing for you at all. All it does is psychologically make you relate to an idea you think you have. So if it, at the end of the day, it all traces back to your psychology, why are we so focused and what's it called, like hell-bent on performing the traditions and not asking what the traditions mean? So I'm going to start finally. And if you open up your Bible or go online, you can find the King James Version Bible. It's free. And go to Genesis 4 verses 1 through 16. The first verse says, "And Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord." Now, Adam and Eve, this will be a different video and me trying to explain, in which I will also better learn the symbolism behind what this means. But Adam in this context represents man, and man in the dual nature represents action. It represents ego. It represents the physical sense, right? And then Eve in this sense obviously represents woman, and women in the symbolic nature represents more of the emotions, more of the spiritual connection to things, intuition, those kinds of stuff. So here you have an ego, mind, and body, and then you have an emotional essence combined with intuition and subconscious intellect, right? So you have the dual nature of the things that already exist in you. Right now, currently, I'm in my masculine energy. I'm taking action and creating a video, right? I'm going about learning and educating myself. But then I'm also intuitively being guided on what to say. I can't possibly plan what I'm saying. That's insane. Nobody has planned a sentence that they're gonna say and made it seem so natural, so organic. Typically, speeches can be very dry unless you're incredibly charismatic or have memorized them and are really good at acting. So it's like the feminine and the masculine are presenting themselves in this sense because they're working cohesively. The masculine action is to make a video, and the feminine principle or action being used is to do it with good intentions. And because the intention's set and the action is being made, they can go together and make more of a cohesive creation, as opposed to if I was in both of the lower aspects of those feminine masculine principles and create something that's absolute crap. And I would resent it and not be proud of it or myself, which also in turn is being proud of God, because God chooses to express in certain ways. So in this sense, Adam is representing the ego and mind, and Eve is representing the emotions. In this part, Adam knew Eve. When you know something, and maybe it's only in this instance, I'm kind of thinking it's him using his mind, using more of like the ego sense. And it also means like to when you know something, you become a part of it, right? So that can also be seen as like having sex or whatever, having a child. She conceived. When you conceive something, when you mix your masculine and your feminine principles together, you give birth to an idea or a manifestation. And that is similar to Neville Goddard's teachings, right? He uses the Bible as well and references stories like this incredibly well, and his lectures are amazing. And I'm also trying to learn them and to better understand the Bible, to better understand how manifestation really works and how to genuinely express as God. But like the Virgin Mary is a really good example of this too, because she is so pure, a virgin thought of pure thought. She was able to conceive a miracle that everyone else would say is impractical or impossible. But when you're in divine, or when you're in alignment with the divine power within you, you can give birth to your manifestation. You don't need anything else. You just need to go within. And there's higher aspects of that, meaning when you're really tuned Esther Hicks says this, tuned in, tapped in, turned on, all that crap. When you're really in it, you can create your manifestation very easily. When you doubt it, when you're fearful, when you fear lack or something along those lines, that's when your manifestation can get kind of wonky, right? Because now you have fear, doubt, guilt, and shame. And those things typically skew your reality because you're feeding your emotions. And emotions are the main currency of the universe. It doesn't really care what your thoughts are. I think Joe Dispenza and Greg Braden talk about this quite often. And they talk about, I think it's called the Heart Math Institute. And they said that your heart beats, or not beats, but it emits 5,000 times more energy than your brain. So imagine that power, what you feel, an emotion I would assume tends to emit from that region. So it's about mastering that feeling and controlling it with your thoughts, using the visualization, not hesitating or quibbling like he would say, and then giving birth to your product. But in this sense, this is right after Adam and Eve fell from grace and had to leave the Garden of Eden. So clearly they were exposed to the lower nature of both of their sides, both of their polarities, and now they're giving birth to this guy named Cain. And in this context, it also says, I have gotten a man from the Lord. When you get something, and we again refer to a man, which was Adam, a man represents the physical world. So she got something. She received something tangible. She's already in a lower aspect. Now she's giving birth and is getting something that emits what that frequency is, right? So now that is going to be a materialistic thing. And in the story of Cain and Abel, that's kind of how it works. You know, Cain kills Abel, like plot twist. Sorry to spoil the, sorry to kill the storyline, or like how, I forget what the saying is. But yeah, what is the saying? I forget. I'm going to remember like 10 minutes in and just be like, by the way. But Cain was a symbolic of the ego and the lower nature of the mind used in that sense. Cain also means tiller of the ground. And that's symbolic of being a farmer. He was known to be a farmer. But in that sense, again, when you're a tiller of the ground, you're reaping the goods of the earth. And that sounds all sweet and good in a general context. But from what I'm understanding in this situation, it means more of like he represents the materialism of the earth and the need of it. I need material items. So that's his place in this story. Now, verse 2. And she again bare his brother Abel. Notice here, she didn't say she had gotten another man from the Lord. She just said, I got his brother Abel, or I bear his brother Abel. And when I look at this, when you say brother, that's kind of like, I don't want to say your other half, that might sound a little strange, but in this sense, this story is about two people. So again, numbers are very important, and numbers mean something very specific at this time when this Bible was written. Like, you'll have people that talk about, oh, 1111, make a wish, that means you're gonna win the lottery, or like 1111, I'm gonna get married, or like 1111, whatever the heck. And like, people assign certain meanings to whatever they want to believe in. And because they so staunchly believe in that thing, it has no chance but to manifest itself into reality. So it's like your belief will create a reality. It doesn't matter about your morality of it, if it's good or bad. It's just your emotions and your belief, and if you don't waver. So that's going to be your creation. So going back to the number thing, I wanted to bring up really quick sorry, I have so many notes. And I'm trying to make them all make sense for you guys and for myself, honestly. But you have the number 2. And if anyone has ever come across William Donahue, I highly recommend going on YouTube and searching for him, because he's got incredible content that talks about all of this. And I'm learning so much from him. And I'm taking the numbers that they speak about in the Bible from his lens. So 2, in his opinion, means body and soul. You and God, or Christ and God. So it essentially means, again, the dual nature of human. You're a man and you're God. So Cain and Abel are brothers, but they're essentially opposites of the same thing, right? one represents the materialism of the body and the ego, and the other one, Abel, which I didn't get to his name yet, but I will describe it to you very shortly. I have to pull it up, but it means vanity in certain contexts. It also means breath or vapor. And when you look at that, the symbology of breath or vapor, breath typically is like, I don't know if anyone has ever heard of Yahweh. I think it's like YHWH. And people are like, oh, it's because, you know, God doesn't really have an actual way to say God. So you just kind of talk about him as if he's a breath. And how do you best write out what a breath is? And they're like, oh, it's the YHWH. But I've also heard contradicting things, not contradicting, but different things. And that's okay. Maybe that is the source of the truth, or maybe there's something else that holds more, that bears more weight to it and makes more sense. But at the end of the day, no one's really right. It's more about just expanding and sharing information. So, but I think it like lends a hand to that direction, is that Abel is symbolic of the breath of life. If you don't breathe, you're gonna get screwed. Like, you need to breathe. So Abel in this context is capable. He's capable of life. He's able of life. He's able to express the true idea of what life is, and that is God. Where Cain is more blinded and is more consumed by his materialistic aspects, because that's who he's supposed to represent. And Cain is not a bad guy. All Cain is in this story later on is more so just representing the violent nature the mind can have once it takes over the soul. And I'll get into that later on. But I just wanted to spell that out for you guys right now to like have a little bit more explanation and clarity on how I'm perceiving this. So, and here, wait, let's see. And she again bare his brother Abel, and Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. So this is going back to the meaning. So I'll just touch on this real quick. When sheep in the Bible, again, from William Donahue's perspective, is the most natural and organic of thoughts you can possibly have that are intuitive and just pure good. And good is just an O short of the word God. So when you are a keeper of a sheep, you're a shepherd. And who were the first people to visit Jesus when he was born? The chosen one. They were shepherds, right? So when you're first born and you're pure and you're the chosen one of consciousness, what are you going to have? You're going to have the most pure thoughts. And how many were there? I think there were 3, or 3 wise men. I don't even know. Maybe I'm messing it up. I am also learning, so bear with me. But the point of what I'm trying to say is shepherds did go, or a shepherd did go. That was the first interaction. So if that's the first interaction, Jesus had the most divine thoughts first. That was his first conception of life and reality. And that's how he was able to go about his life holding that type of consciousness. And that's why he's so symbolic. And with Abel being a keeper of the sheep, he's reflecting that idea of shepherds watching their sheep. Shepherds watch their thoughts. Shepherds understand their divine thoughts, and they understand their not so divine thoughts, but they still watch them. Similar to me and you. Just because you think a billion things in the day doesn't mean you act on them, doesn't mean you give them your emotions, doesn't mean you identify as them. All it means is you are very good at observing them. And when you can become the observer, you're no longer controlled by your emotions or your mind. And that is when you have the higher aspects of Cain and Abel in high gear. When Cain and Abel are out of control, that means your subconscious is cloudy, you're not really focused, your mind's all over the place, your emotions are scrambled, and you just feel kind of screwy. So in this instance, Abel is very stable, and Cain is doing decent until they give gifts to God. So the next line 3, it says, and in process of time it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. So here it's basically saying Cain gave God something very material as a gift. Then line 4 says, and Abel, he also brought of his firstlings of his flock, and of the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering. So here, God didn't say anything about Cain in the last line, and now he's telling Abel, hey dude, love the sheep, right? It says, he also brought of the firstlings of his flock. The firstlings of a flock, well, sheep are in a flock, right? So if you have a lot of sheep, that means you have a lot of divine thoughts and just thoughts in general. But when you bring the firstlings, when you bring the very first, most pure, most untainted by human thought, and you offer that to God, that's showing you're so aware of your connection and relationship to him that you are expressing through a gift that you understand you are him. And that's why God accepts Abel, because he's capable, right? So line 5 says, but unto Cain and to his offerings he had no respect, and Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. So if you don't know this, I didn't know this. Wroth is, think of like wrath. It's like angry, furious. And countenance, that's like your facial expressions. So essentially here, God's like, nah, man, I'm not taking your wheat, and don't care. And Cain got really mad, and he's just like, dude, so you took my brother's stuff, but not mine. You took the gift of my brother, giving his awareness to you and understanding that he is you, but in human flesh form. And you won't accept my offering of material goods, which is showing my deep connection into needing physical things. Cain can offer to God his first sheep because he doesn't have sheep. He doesn't have a flock. He's a farmer of just the soil, a tiller of the ground. That's it. There's nothing more than that. There's nothing above the ground. He's just material, right? And so 6, there's the passage that says, and the Lord said unto Cain, why art thou wroth? And why is thou countenance fallen? If thou dost well, shall thou not be accepted? And if thou doust not well, sorry, not frickin' Shakespeare, sin lieth at the door, and unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. So basically here God is saying, like, dude, you know the drill. Like, you just have to offer to me what Abel was able to do. Are you able to tap into the most intuitive part of yourself, the most spiritual understanding of who you are as a being, and show me that you know that as an offering? You know you have to do that, right? You know that that's the way. And, if you don't do that, you're not going to be accepted. But if you do that, you will be. And at the last line it says, and unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. So basically here it's saying, whatever you choose, whether you choose to be your soul and your intuition and your spirit, and you choose to be guided by it, and you choose to trust God in your path and what you're meant to do, and you follow your purpose, you can choose that, and you can reap the rewards of that, and that will rule over you. Or, you have free will. You can choose the material realm, and sin will lie at the door. And sin in this context, when it says, and if thou dost not well, sin lieth at the door. Sin, in Will Donahue's perspective, means dwelling in your emotions. And when you dwell in your emotions, it's typically because you're blinded by the 3D world you live in, right? The only way you know you're a living being is by using your senses. As soon as you close your eyes and I ask you to describe something to me as if you had never seen it before, you wouldn't be able to describe it, right? So a part of you is actually connecting to your spirit and into your soul because you can't use your eyes to see. You're using your internal eye to see. We have the 5 senses externalized and the 5 senses internalized. When Lucifer translates to fallen star, right? A star has 5 points, and the 5 points connect directly. 5 in the Bible means your senses. So when you're dwelling in the Luciferian 5 senses, you're dwelling in the 3D nature of your reality. You're overconsumed by what your eyes are showing you. You're overconsumed by what you're feeling with your hands or your body. You're overconsumed by what you're hearing. That will create fear, guilt, and shame, lack. tasting, whatever. When you're overindulgent in your five senses in the 3D realm, you are sinning because you're dwelling in your emotions and you're being like Lucifer, you're being like Satan. Now, when you have Jesus Christ, who was crucified and also had 5 holes created in his body, 5 points of contact. He had his 2 hands, he had his 2 feet, and then he had a dash on the side. That was the higher aspect, right? Even though that had happened to him, what was he able to do? He was able to resurrect and see beyond it. He didn't care. It was fine. It's all good. So when you're using, when you're dwelling in your emotions and your physical state, you're sinning. And that's also why you can't manifest the reality you want, because it's not here, right? Whatever it is you want is not here. Well, if it's not here, what are you projecting? You're projecting lack. And you can't possibly get what you don't already have. And Neville had said something that always sticks with me. I always try to remember. But he's like, you can't want something you already have. And I thought that was so simply said and so beautiful. It's very easy to remember. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's not easy to remember, but I think the more you practice it, it's easy to remember, because the more when you meditate and understand, like, hey, yeah, let me turn off my 5 senses. Let me go within. Let me get in touch with my 5 internal senses and feel God. What am I seeing with my 3rd eye? What am I hearing with my intuition and my connection to everything else that's outside of me? That is when you're going to create the most beautiful reality possible, because God or universe knows so much more about what your purpose is and what you're here to create than what your mind can possibly comprehend. Your mind will always think your plans are safe because it can dictate the outcome, where your mind cannot dictate God's outcome for you. And because you are part God, you are able to have the choice to listen to that intuition, but the intuition is not calculable, because it's not being, you cannot process it with your mind. There's nothing to calculate. There's no data to use. The only data you can really use is your heart coherence. And that's really it, and having faith. And I'm pretty sure, what's it called? I think faith or something translated in a different religion, or not different. I'm seeing my heads all over the place. Faith translates to a specific word. I think that is interchangeable with confidence. And confidence is an expression you have to have. And confidence comes from the emotion of being okay. And I'm pretty sure Michael Singler had a book about this. And it was a book I listened to, I think The Untethered Soul, a couple years ago. And he's just like, people are just not okay. And all they have to be is just okay. And I get it, Michael. Sangler, I can never pronounce it, but shout out to you. You have incredible content and you know what you're doing and you help me, so thank you. Okay, cool. So let's go on to... So basically God was like, dude, you know what to do? You gave me wheat. It's not cutting it. You need to give me your heart, and you're not willing to do that. So Cain is pissed. We have line 8, and it says, and so Cain and Abel went outside to talk, right? Have you ever had a conundrum with somebody and you're like, just come on, let's clear the water. Let's like figure it out. Let's go outside. Let's talk. Let's chat, right? So it says, and Cain talked with Abel, and it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel and slew him. Basically, Cain killed Abel, right? He was just like, come outside. Let's talk. Let's talk about this whole thing that just happened. It's just, it's God just being dramatic. Didn't want my wheat. He's gluten-free, and he wanted, your capability of expressing your soul, and that's cool and all. And hey, look at that bird, and just bam. I was gonna swear, but I don't want to get demonetized or whatever the heck. So, but maybe I shall. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I will. I don't care. We'll see. But basically, so here you have Cain representing the mind and Abel representing the spirit or intuition. How many times has your mind slown or sloon, whatever you want to say, your spirit? How many times have you felt called to do something, to talk to that person, to go to this new place, to move somewhere, to quit your job and do what is interesting to you? I'm not advising you to go haywire and whatever, but I'm just saying those little random things that don't make logical sense is Cain trying to keep your body safe, because the mind can only calculate what the mind constructs. Then you have Abel saying, hey, that baking thing you like to do, I know you're a lawyer and you make like really good money and you do great, but you hate your job, kind of depressed when you come home, you never really see your family. Why don't you start that baking business? I mean, I don't know, just a thought. Then you give it a thought, you know, and you like kind of ruminate and like a daydream about what that would be like. And like time passes and you go to a store and you bump into an old friend, and the old friend's just like, you know what I was thinking? Remember how we used to bake in high school together for a fundraiser for our soccer team? Why don't we take those recipes and open a business? Would you be interested in, you know, starting a baking business? And just like that, because you took no thought. In the Bible, I have no idea how many times it says this, but it says take no thought. When you feel at peace and visualize what you want for yourself, sometimes those visualizations are given to you. They're not constructed by your choosing of imagination. They're blips of inspiration that come from divine guidance that are not created by your mind. When that happens, that is something that makes you feel so much joy to believe in the potential that it exists, because now you're dwelling in your imagination. And there's a Bible passage, and I believe Florence Scovel Schinn also had said this: the walls of Jericho fell when the children had screamed. And basically Jericho is just symbolic of like all the hardness adults create in their world. I forget what Jericho is as a city, but I'm sure it's like symbolic of just like war and like negative thinking and some kind of stuff like that. And the children were the ones that were able to take down the wall because they screamed. What were they screaming with? Most likely joy, right? Have you ever seen a kid play on a playground? Bananas loud. So loud, okay? So when you become a kid and you use your imagination and you follow the passions in which light you up and make you happy, the walls of Jericho fall. You can manifest the reality you want and give birth to Jesus Christ anytime you'd like. It's just a matter of being virgin in your thoughts and in your intention. And that's what the Bible will keep explaining to us time in and time out until we finally pay attention to it. But the beautiful part about this is many times in the Bible, you have so many different people. Like there's so many kids being born and it's all from the same family, right? So now you have incest and it's like hundreds of babies being born all over the place. One's name is Japheth, then you have Noah, then you have Moses, then you have Isaiah, and then you have Abraham that becomes Abraham and Sarah, and you're like, do you guys have identity crisis? And it's like, where is this all coming from? And like, I don't understand. And the reason why it's so ridiculous is because it's meant to get your attention. It's made for you to question it. Not for you just to go home after mass and be like, yeah, that weird Jacob kid, man, had 12 kids and cheated on his wife, and his wife was cool with it. It does not mean anything literal. It is said to be crazy in that context to grab your attention and to have you question, what are they actually saying here? And that's how the dynamic of all these different relationships occur, is because there's Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel have kids, Cain and Abel have more kids. The legacy continues. Then there's Noah. Noah builds an ark. There's a whole flood that happens that wipes out the entire earth because everyone becomes impure in their thought and their intentions, and Noah is the pure one, and he's asked to leave everything behind and become this person, and he does, and he listens to God, and he reproduces with correct consciousness and correct mindset and brings all the animals, which are also pure, and all animals represents our beasts, and beasts represent different parts of our mind. You have the slithering creatures, I think they're called, which like represent like the underlying tones of like your subconscious, the very dark, deep parts of your mind you don't want to deal with, like the snakes and the worms and the spiders and the dirt. And then you have the fowl in the air, and those are like high intellectual thoughts, or, you know, it can be described in different ways. But basically what it is all these animals are a symbolism of the animal in you. You know, the mark of the beast makes a lot of sense because it ties back to the devil thing I was talking about. You're marked with the beast when you dwell in your emotions, when you dwell in your senses. But you don't have the freaking mark of the beast when you alleviate them, right? So that was a side tangent, but I also thought it was important. Okay, so Cain kills Abel. The mind kills the soul for wanting to do what's pure and just. Okay, line 9. And the Lord said unto Cain, where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? And Cain is being literally like the most I was gonna say, never mind. The most moody, the most moody 13-year-old girl. And he's just like, I don't have to watch my brother. What are you talking about? It's just like, I will strangle you. I'm not a parent, but I'm an aunt. There's certain times where you're like, try me. Do that one more time, I swear to God. And I feel like a lot of parents out there understand that. It's not because you don't love them. Of course you love them. It's just challenging your mind. It's challenging your ego. And that's the point of children, is to make you expand and catch yourself and be like, why do I feel this way? I shouldn't feel this way. I need to control that, right? So God is being like, dude, where's your brother? And Abel's like, I don't know, man, even though he's got like blood stains all over his, or sorry, and Cain is like, he's got blood stains all over his shirt. And he's like, I don't know. Line 10, and he said, what hast thou done? The voice of thy brothers crieth unto me from the ground. And here, when I read that, I kind of thought of thy voice of thy brother's blood. So blood to me means like your life force. It doesn't really mean like actual blood. And the voice. So voice is like vibration. And I think it's like the identifying note of a person. So it's kind of like the expression, I would say, of his life. The expression of his life is on the ground and it's just donezo. And God's like, why? Why did you kill the soul? Why did you do that? Like, I don't understand what your problem is. But it makes a lot of sense because the mind does crazy things when it's emotional and erratic. Line 11, and now art thou cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand. So here God is being like, listen, you're not going to get any benefits of the earth. Like, this earth tried to provide for you, and all you did is just put your brother's blood all over it, and you disrespected it. Line 12, when thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth. I'm going to use vagabond for like from now on. That's such a great word. But I didn't know what that meant when I first read it. But here basically God's saying like, yo, because you're a farmer, like, you know, figuratively, when you till from the ground, it's not going to bear you any fruit. You know that wheat you gave to me 5 seconds ago, hard pass. Like, you're never going to be able to give somebody gluten again. And like, don't even think about getting into rice or whatever, because that's gone too. You're done. So God is essentially giving the mind a whooping, and it's just like, dude, you need to check yourself first before you wreck yourself. Well, he already wrecked himself. He's already done. He just 2 for 1. He already did it. But we have here that it says, a fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth. A vagabond is somebody who wanders. So think of somebody aimlessly moving around city to city, not really having purpose, right? Because purpose comes from the soul. A fugitive is someone who is running from the law, and the law is kind of the word of God. So if you're wandering because you don't have purpose and you're running from your soul's calling, that's what's happening to Cain right here. Like, you can go to anything material and it will not bring onto you any strength. It will not give you any dopamine hits. You will be void of feeling anything of the physical world because you had done this. So it's basically a punishment to the ego being like, absolutely not, right? Line 13, and Cain said unto the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. So imagine just like chilling, and then one day you can no longer, I mean, maybe this has happened to somebody before, but they can't taste, touch, see, smell, or hear. And you just walk around and void of experience. You know, I don't want to say void of joy because I guess that's like very much like a choice in your perspective and stuff like that. But like compared from like when you're running high on dopamine rushes from abusing whatever material aspect of reality you're abusing, to then being like, sorry, never again, bye. That is such a 180 pivot of reality that you don't know what to do. It's like going to an alcoholic and being like, sorry, take the bottle, and they're not ready to change. or any kind of person who's addictive, it will cause this kind of like loss of sense of self. Who am I, right? I have to face whatever I haven't been able to face because this addiction has been buffering that communion between me and my demons. It's been stagnating the progress of that clearance. So now that all of a sudden that the band-aid's ripped off, it's just like, this is the worst thing you could have possibly done to me. The mind can't comprehend it because now it can't enjoy the five senses. So yeah, Cain's like, dude, this is horrible. Line 13. Literally, the Bible should have just written that. Can you imagine if it was like, henceforth, this and fugitive and vagabond, and then Cain was like, nah, man, it ain't, this ain't it. But line 14, it says, behold, thou hast driven me out this day from the face of the earth, and from thy face shall I be hid, and I shall be a fugitive and vagabond in the earth. And it shall come to pass that every one that findeth me shall slay me. So basically, Cain is saying here, God, listen, like, you drove me off the face of reality. Like, I can't enjoy my experience. I'm not really too sure what I'm doing. From the soul, it says, and from thy face shall I be hid. I cannot face you. I will never be able to understand you. I am permanently separated from Abel because I killed him. So he literally severed his own soul, because remember, this is just a dual nature between you as a man and your relationship with God. We went back to the number 2, and this is what it's representing. So he literally got rid of his 2, and now he's just a mind. And so he can never, ever, ever understand his brother Abel, because he separated Abel from the mind, from himself, because essentially these people are the same person, figuratively, because it represents you, right? And I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth, and it shall come to pass that everyone that findeth me shall slay me. So here it's saying that he's a wanderer, and he has no purpose, and just going around, and anyone that finds me shall slay me. This guy is terrified that he's gonna die because everyone's gonna know what he did. But this part is really cool and super important. And it says, and the Lord said unto him, therefore, whoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. In this line, when I was reading it, sorry, I just wanted to reread it one more time. Cain's freaking out. People are going to kill him because they think that, everyone's going to think poorly of him because he killed his brother. But God here is saying something very interesting. And he's like, I'm going to mark you, and I'm going to keep you safe. And anybody who tries to take you out will get the same experience, the same like treatment you had, but times 7. Now, the number 7 in the Bible, again, in Will Donahue's perspective, is divine intervention. So here it's basically saying, whoever slays Cain, vengeance shall be taken upon him sevenfold. I'm not so sure that vengeance means something very violent here. Vengeance, I think, is seen in a modern day and age as something very punishment driven, very dark. But when you really look at the definition of vengeance, it means justice. And there's nothing really positive or negative about justice. It just means neutrality. It means balancing the scales. So whoever slays Cain, balance shall be taken onto him sevenfold. 7 means divine intervention. Now, people might disagree with this, but basically here, in my opinion, what it means is, if you slay Cain, if you try to slay your thoughts, if you try to get rid of your ego, divine intervention will come in and will give you justice. It will make you understand why you need Cain. It will bring balance back to you. It will bring balance back to understanding why Cain needs Abel and Abel needs Cain. If you get rid of Cain, you can't experience the world. You can't go get ice cream. You can't go ice skating with your friends. You can't give someone a kiss or a hug. You can't experience music. You can't dance. You can't feel those sensations. The problem with Cain in this story is that he's representing the over-exaggerated nature of dwelling in materialism, and that's why it's a problem. But even though Cain went so far as to abusing it as much as he did, God said, you're protected. No one can get rid of you, I promise. And that is such a beautiful thing. It's not that vengeance and evil and whatever will be done to Cain because he's such a bad person. It's just balance will be brought back to the situation. If anyone tries to do the same thing Cain did, if anyone tries to kill Cain or whatever, God will intervene and make you understand why you need Cain. That's, in my opinion, what it's saying. And going back to the idea of just balance, of feeling okay, of understanding you need both things. And line 16 says, and Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden. When everything comes from the right, it comes from the east. And when you go east, you head towards like essentially the promised land. I want to say Jerusalem, but I don't know how accurate that is. But that also explains like a lot about what is going on with the wars and different fighting over properties that existed in the Bible. People take these locations very literally, and all these are locations that we need to take figuratively and understand we can find this within us. When you dwell in the east, that's actually seen as a very good sign because you're going to the right side. And when you go to the right side of your brain, when you go within and you meditate, the left side of the brain is all the logical and comprehensive stuff we use to like discern how to go about reality and judge things to keep us safe, right? And then the 90%, so the 10% is the left side of the brain, and people say like in science we only really use 10% of our brain, right? So then we think the 90% is what, garbage? Like, no, absolutely not. We're divine beings, and that means we have far more intensive hardware than just something that should be thrown away. 90%, like that's ridiculous. So 90% is actually symbolic of using your intuition and going within and using that meditation. When you tithe, it typically says to tithe 10%. And when you tithe 10%, it doesn't mean give me 10% to donate to the church of what you make as your income. It means give me 10% of your brain. Give me 10%, that left side, that logical, literal, comprehensive side you're trying to interpret reality with to understand God, and just give it away. And if you give away the 10%, God will give you 90. That's like how the abundance multiplies. And that's again why I'm like hesitant with like the whole tithing thing and donating to the church, because it's like, it's not what the Bible means. And it's all about using that right side. And I only say that because with this last part, and Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden. So this guy is like wandering around on the east of Eden. He's getting close to the mark, but he's like not hitting it. When you get to Eden, the garden is there, right? But he's like dwelling outside of it. He's a, what's it called? A wanderer, a fugitive, and he can't find his purpose. And the whole point of that is if you use your mind and are over-consumed with the material nature of reality, you will not find your purpose. Like, there's no way. You can't possibly, because you have the richest of the rich people have all these incredible things, and then they still feel empty inside. They still use drugs. They still like get into these crazy relationships and then get divorced and have kids and then pawn their kids off to some, what's it called? To like some person who watches them lovingly, and then they have no relationship with their child and they wonder why their life is shit, but hey, I got money. And it's like, when you're so disconnected from what brought you here, right? This is just a machine. This means nothing at all in comparison to the divine thing that had created us as humans, as a species. And in the Bible, I forget what the exact wording is, but it says, and make man in our image. It says our image. God isn't some floating man in the sky or a single entity. It's just a really easy term to use to define something that you believe that's beyond yourself. But when the book itself says our image, what the heck does that mean? So I was made in an image of a multitude of entities that brought me here. So what are those entities, right? Those entities are something that are so brilliant to create such a divine, knowledgeable machine that can run itself through electricity with a beating heart and a cognitive brain to create thoughts and to express love. And here I am thinking, man, maybe I should just, I don't know, work a 9 to 5 forever and only focus on that. And I'm not saying work isn't important, but to branch out a little bit above the typical grind we have in this day and age, and to see beyond it, and to really go within and to question, what's my purpose, right? No one else can tell me that. No one's advice can tell me that. I can't tell you that. I don't want to tell you that. I want you to tell you that. I want you to figure it out. I want everyone to disconnect from the distractions, from the social media, from the marketing saying you're not good enough, you need this drug to feel better, you need this makeup to look good, you need Ozempic to lose the weight, blah, 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 all this stuff. No. What is, and that's perfect. And that just needs to be. And if there's improvement to be made, great, it will be made. But in this moment, it is good. And when a moment is good, it is God. And when you're operating from that philosophy, I don't think we can quibble, like Neville would say, as often as we would if we weren't conscious. So I'm going to wrap it up on that. This was quite a long tangent of a story. So I really appreciate you guys listening. And if you learned something, I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear if anyone found value out of this. If you think that, hey, I'm missing the bar or bill here and like I should like look into other people, I would love to hear who I should look into and what I should read, because I just love learning. And honestly, especially about things like this. And the whole point, like I had said before, is about expanding and sharing. If you don't share, you can't possibly expand. And expansion is uncomfortable. To accept another person's truth can be uncomfortable because it challenges the reality I'm comfortable with. But once the expansion keeps happening and we keep growing, then it's like you understand the limitless potential of what the human race it can come up with and share with one another and to figure out about reality. I'm not too sure if that like resonated, but it's like, man, the more I learn, the less I know. And I'd rather, the more I learn, the less I know. And I can't wait to know even less because I want to learn even more. So with that being said, thank you guys. Take care.